Hey, I'm Tori. Welcome to Omega Ready and our latest installment in our Fix and Shit series. Today, we're taking a look at this Champion 2000 watt inverter generator. Got it for a deal because it's a no start. So we scored this from an orphanage just up the road. Turns out Mother Gertrude at the orphanage isn't too mechanically inclined. So she apparently doesn't know much about troubleshooting, and apparently the orphans couldn't be bothered to give her a hand trying to fix this rig, so we got it for a pretty good deal. Whoa, easy with the judging eyes there. Easy. Those guys already have a brand new generator that's working fine. I checked with her. And they were just getting rid of stuff that was laying around. So took it off their hands, we're gonna get this thing going. So let's get torn into it. We're good, right? Right? All right, let's get into this thing. Before we actually start taking this any further is when I got it, inspected it, this fuel valve is in the on position. Now that can mean a couple things. Number one, obviously the orphanage tried to start this thing before using it, and obviously you're going to turn that fuel valve on, so maybe they just left it on. More than likely, based on my experience, is that when somebody used the generator for the last time, they shut it off as opposed to letting it run out of fuel. Switching this to the off position is a necessary step for a generator because the majority of time when you're done using it, it's going to sit for weeks, months, maybe even years. The last place you want that fuel is sitting inside the carburetor where it's going to gum things up. So always shut your generator off after it's done cooling down by shutting that switch to the off position. So again, this was in the on position, so I think I've got a pretty good idea what's going on. We'll get into the carburetor in a little bit, see what we can find with it. So the other thing I noticed, looking on this side, is that the exhaust is pretty sooty. This venting obviously allows heat to come out of the generator, and specifically the exhaust through this port, and there's a lot of carbon on it, right? Which suggests it's running less than ideal. It's running pretty fat, a little rich on the mixture. So that's another observation. And the other thing is I noticed when I pulled the choke, this is the choke pull for starting, it doesn't have almost any travel to it. It feels like maybe a 1/4 inch. It just seems wrong to me. I mean, I'm not saying it's got to pull out an inch or two, but a 1/4 inch just doesn't seem right. All right, so before we tear into this thing, let's take a look at the specs on the unit. You can find everything on the back side here listed on the data tag. So this is model 73536i. It's 120 volt output at 60 hertz, running output at 1700 watts, starting output at 2000 watts. Single phase, the engine runs at 4500 RPM, and a max AC amp output of 14.2 and DC amp output of 8.0. Max ambient temp at $104. So now that we got the specs out of the way, let's get the back cover off, take a look at it. All right, so to get the back cover off, you've got 4 Phillips screws, 1 in each corner here. Locking tab on the top, hooks into there, be careful for that. Okay, so again, we've got our carburetor assembly over here on the left side from the back view. We've got our air box, an up tube into the carburetor inlet where I see my choke. I've got a breather line that comes in to the carb. Well, that clamps a little high. I doubt that's any kind of a problem though. It comes in to the carb inlet from the crankcase here. Yeah, okay, which you can't see, it's behind this brace. So let's start by getting this air box out of the way. right, there's the fuel drain hose. That's kind of in the way, so, all right, covers out. Definitely got some dust buildup on the bottom at the inlet side, which I don't think is any telltale of anything. It's frankly how it should be. We've got our filter element in place, so I pulled that off, and it's got some dust buildup on the outboard side, which you would obviously expect to see, and it's got some crap on the inside. Hopefully this thing ain't dusted. All right, so looking closer at the rest of the air box, well, there's definitely some dust on the inside of it, like it didn't seal very well. You can see my fingerprints right there, so that is not a good sign. Hope those orphans weren't playing around with the air filter. You can see inside there, looks like we got another 10 mil fastener that's holding the air box to some structure behind it just to hold it in place. Maybe the engine, I can't tell. So we'll go ahead and pull this clamp off the breather inlet. Like some of that rubber's a little cracked there. Just a wee little bit of oil, which you would expect to see. All right, so we got an extension for this 10 mil. I don't know that I have to take the air box off. We're just going to do it because we're going to live dangerously today. And then I've got two fasteners on either side of the carburetor inlet face where the boot from the air box connects to it. So extension off. And let's get these 10 mil nuts off of here. Number one. And number two. So, looks like everything's out of the way. There is another fastener on the side of the airbox that's holding it in place. $10 mil an extension. Zip that thing out of there. Crikey. All right, so I dropped it. There's not a lot of real estate in there. This thing's a pygmy generator, so let's grab our handy magnet. So we don't need to root around in there with our chops. So we'll put that there. So those two are for airbox. This longer one was the one that went through the back of the filter housing onto the engine, and this is the one that we just took off that was on the right side of the filter housing, and the two nuts for the carb. Okay, so now the filter housing looks like it's free to come out, so just tilt it from the top, pull it back, boom. I don't see any cracks or anything in there, so that's good. Okay, so now we've got full access to our carb, which is now kind of floating on the two studs that are attached to the head. So I don't necessarily want to go beyond that. The next thing we're going to have to do is shut that fuel valve off, which it is. And we've got ourselves a nice simple Phillips drain down here to empty what's in the carb. So I suppose we should start with that. Okay, so I've got a container. Let's pull this up a titch. And drain that fuel out. Okay, we start to see some air in there. Obviously the fuel shutoff valve appears to be working. It's a good time to confirm that. And boom, it's drained. There's not much to it. So let's tighten that back up momentarily, just slightly. And since we're here anyways, one of the things I observed was that the choke seemed to not have a lot of play in it. So on your carburetor, you're going to have a choke in front, and your throttle plate will be further back into the port closer to the head. So I'm going to reach over and I'm going to cycle. So I'm Right now I'm fully out on the choke cable, and you can see that the plate is fully closed, which sounds about right. That's what you're doing. You're choking off the air supply. But when I push the thing all the way in, my God, it barely even moves. I mean, clearly it's more open, but it should be more perpendicular to the throat of the carburetor, right? I need to allow more air in. So that's interesting, and that might explain some of the soot we're seeing in the exhaust. I guess we'll come back to that. I don't think that's the reason it's not starting, but it might not run very well if we do get it started. So we'll come back to that. So we have drained the fuel out of the carburetor. And now I think it's a good idea to get the get the float or get the bowl off of the carb. All right, so it's a 10 mil. I'm gonna hold the carb as I loosen this. It shouldn't be very tight, and it's not, kind of comes right off. So before we take that off anymore, let's grab a rag, tuck it in there. I know I drained it, but it's definitely gonna leak some more because that's how this stuff works. You never get it all out. Oh, well, it dropped right off. Okay. First and foremost, this stinks. I'm hoping you can see the tarnish that's inside this bowl, as well as looks like some debris. Oh, that's definitely funky. So if you can see that on my finger, definitely got some garbage in here that's probably plugged our carburetor up. So, okay. So we're gonna have to set that aside and clean it. Shouldn't take much more than some carb cleaner. So looking closer at my carburetor here, it looks like my O-ring or my gasket for that bowl was stuck on the carb body, so we want to make sure that that stays with the bowl. I'm going to lift the float up on the carb, and you can see here in front of my finger what looks to be a jet. So that draws fuel up into the body of the carburetor where it gets mixed in with the air. So that's kind of cool. I assumed it was going to be up this well, which is going to make it harder to get to with the right size screwdriver. So if this in fact is the jet, let's get a screwdriver and see if we can't pull that off, because again, if this thing's full of garbage, that's one thing. That's the supply of the fuel to that jet, and if the garbage just stays on the bottom of this, which it won't, but let's pretend it does, then hey, that's fine, you just got a dirty bowl. But what's going to happen typically is as you draw fuel up through this jet, you're going to get debris into it too. So we're going to pull that jet, we're going to clean that bowl, we're going to clean that jet, and we're going to pump some carb spray into that port and up through this well to just make sure we get everything out. And we got a rag in here so we can capture any debris that finds its way out, so we can prove that we did it. And I'm going to screw that out. Make sure you've got that rag under there, because this damn thing is quite small. And when you drop it, good luck finding it down there. And I don't know if it's brass or what it is, so your magnet might not pick it up. Okay, so there we got our jet. Let's see if we can't do the old light test. See if we can see it through the jet. Can't really do this with the camera very well. Okay, well you see light shining through the jet, so that's a good sign. But again, it doesn't mean it's not impeding fuel flow. Clearly it's not plugged, but we're gonna clean it nonetheless. So I'm gonna start in the carb body here by spraying this thing up. And you can see it shooting out the jet hole, as well as coming back down through the port. So, and then I'm going to flush some through that hole, right, and then back up again one more time. All right, so we're going to let that drip down. I'm reluctant to take a wire brush to this thing. Don't want to gouge it up. If it's brass, and I can't really tell if it is, it kind of seems like it is. I don't know, but typically this is softer metal and it can gouge up easy, and if you go in there with something like a screwdriver bit on the inside where the orifice is, you'll jack that thing up and it won't flow very smoothly or well. Or hell, you could even make it bigger and it flows too much. So I try to do that with some liquid cleaner if possible. So let's see what we get here. Now watch your eyes with this because obviously it's going to squirt back at you. The jet is definitely cleaned out. I mean, I got to be honest with you, I couldn't necessarily see what was in there or how much or if anything, to be honest. But if it's going to plug, that's where it's going to plug. That's the first place at least. Okay, so now I'm going to clean up this bowl. All right, so we definitely got a bunch of nasty sediment coming out of there. So you can see all that off color stuff on this rag is from the sediment that was inside that bowl. And on this side, you can see the physical debris that came out of that bowl. And I have no doubt that that was inside that jet. That needs to go back together. Okay, so step one is getting our jet back into the carb body. Oh my God, that thing is tiny. Oh, you dirty. All right. So I got it started. Obviously this thing is small and it is soft by comparison to what it's going into. So we're just gonna apply a nice even torque to it, nothing much. So it ain't gonna rattle loose. I want to get another one of these. That gasket does not feel very good. I'm not saying it's gonna leak, but it's like jagged, ragged. Okay. So that's currently in place on the bowl. I'm sorry, on the carb. And I do not see it hanging down anywhere, so now we're going to take our carb, the bolt that goes into the bottom, and carefully thread that in as well. I feel like Bob Ross night now talking you through a painting. Isn't it majestical? And then I'm going to apply a nice gentle torque to this 1/4-inch ratchet with a 10mm socket. All right, so I want to point out on these two. Hello? Hello? So I'm going to stop here, and I'm not going to put the air filter housing back on because I'm full of great ideas, so that in case there's a problem with this carb that I didn't catch and I have to pull it off and do it what I'll call the right way, then it's just a little bit less screwing around, right? So I'm going to take a look at this spark plug. So I pulled the grommet off, and I'm going to reach my hands in here and try to separate this. Wow, good luck with that. Oh my. Okay. All right, so I've got a 13/16" socket with an extension, and boom, fits the plug. Let's get that thing cracked loose and see what we got here. I, of course, am missing the rubber grommet that goes into my spark plug socket, so... All right, well, like I was saying, the plug looks good, and I just was looking for my feeler gauges to check the gap on that plug, and I don't seem to know where the SAM held are at. So we're going to go with the current setting because, you know, to my untrained eye, I think that looks pretty close. I'll give you the spec for it in a second here. So let's get that plug into the boss. All right, so that's tight. Let's get that boot back on. All right, so the boot's in and tight. The carb is temporarily set up to run without the filter, so we can see if we fixed anything. Okay, so we are ready to get this thing outside and see if we can't get it to fire. Step one. All right, so we're outside now. we've got the fuel on. We'll pull the choke out. We have to turn this vent to the on position, which is up here on top of the cap. And let's see if we can't get her to bite. Nice. Wow, I'm impressed. That thing fired right up. Okay, so we'll let it warm up for a bit. And then if it stays running okay, then we'll apply some load to it and see what happens from there. All right, so it's been running a few minutes, and I'll get closer to it in a second so you can hear it better. But it's semi-warm to warm, and it's not running very good. I can smell it. It doesn't smell very good, and it certainly doesn't sound very good. So I think we're gonna shut it off, and we're gonna pull the spark plug out, and we're gonna take a look at it and see if the spark plug tells us anything about how it's running. Off. Okay, so here's a better shot of that spark plug. And if you can make this out, it's quite sooty. And I can see the way it's kind of shining in the light that it is not combusting very well. So either that gap's wrong, which I don't think it is, or it's that choke setting. I'd bet this generator that if I open that choke setting up, that it's going to definitely fix that mixture quality right up by letting some more air in. So we'll try that, and we'll let it run, see if it sounds better. Pull the plug after a few minutes and double check that it doesn't look like this. It should clean up, and then we will try this again. I'm going to loosen the set screw, put the throttle or the choke all the way open, tighten the set screw at that position, and then see if I can't get the choke to work, but allow it to fully open back up, as again, this is a huge restriction. So let me grab, looks like an 8. Oh, okay, so this is an 8. Oh, you little prick. And the set screw is a 7. Okay, there it went. Okay, so with the choke pushed all the way, see how it's moving on the cable now? So with the choke pushed all the way in, I want that plate to be as open as I can be within reason. So I'm going to try to hold it there as I tighten that down. So it's just snug right now. I'm going to tighten it up a little bit and then pull the cable to make sure it actually chokes it. Okay, so that should be snug. Okay, so the travel on that choke lever now is 100% better. And as you can see, I go from full choke with the lever pulled all the way out to the throttle being, or I'm sorry, the choke being fully open when inserted. So let me tighten it up a little bit more. And then let's fire this up and try it again. All right, so engine's on. We'll pull the choke out to see if it needs it to start. Let's see. So now we'll let that sit a few minutes and run and see if it cleans itself up. So the spec, oh, that's hot. The spec calls for 0.024 to 0.028, and I'm starting with 0.024, and I can't get her through, so she's a little tight. Let me grab the right tool. All right, so I got the plug adjusted. I'm not going to show that tedious act, but this is 2.024 again, and you can see it just goes in. I got no slop in it, so it's definitely good to go. So we're going to throw this thing back in. So to load it, I'm going to run an extension cord through our electricity monitor, which will plug into one of the jacks. And once I let it warm up for just a little bit, I'm going to apply, I've got a heat lamp here and a heat gun. So I'll use one of the heat lamps, which should be about 250 watts, to just start things off, and we'll see how it goes from there. And if that's good, we'll plug in the second heat lamp, and then we'll use the heat gun to really bring this in close up to that 1700 value. So we'll start with this. I'm going to start it first, let it go a little bit, and then plug that in. All right, so here goes the load. All right, second load. All right, so second load's been applied, and it's kicking it around 540 watts. All right, so the heat gun setting is on low, and we've come up to 1130 watts. Now she gave us a little puff of black smoke, and she's sitting good at 1650. The meter's reading overload, but the generator panel is not. That green light means it's putting out, and if there was an overload, that middle red light to the left of the green would be flashing, which it's not. All right, so it's definitely lugging, and it's been sitting at 1650 now for a few minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and take the load off, let it cool down a little bit, and then we're gonna shut it off and check that plug reading, see if it's cleaned up at all. It's important for the generator, right? Don't forget, heat is the enemy of any of these things, especially electronics. Over time, it'll cook things, so it's always a good idea when you're running the generator to give it some time to unload and cool itself down before you shut it off. All right, so hopefully that light shows it better. So the porcelain, the ceramic, the porcelain on that insulator is nice and white and clean. So she definitely cleaned up. So we got the right plug gap set. And I think most importantly, we got that choke opened up because it was definitely restricting airflow. So this thing is hitting 1650 watts and it's doing it relatively well. So I'd say we got ourselves a pretty good deal on this generator. All right, easy. Right, so it's a big day here. We got this thing up and running in no time flat. A couple minor adjustments, some cleaning. I'd say it handled that test out there extremely well. Took us right to 1650 watts and held it without any problems for a few minutes. And that's all I'm looking for. Again, just want to confirm that A, it runs, and B, it runs well enough to accept the rated load. So I'm not going to fret about the 50 watts. It is what it is. I'm sure it'll handle it. So I'm going to grab the camera quick and I'm going to show you, hopefully in a little bit better detail, what I adjusted here on the choke. So here's your carb assembly. Your choke cable is here, coming in from the choke cable. The cable comes here and it goes through that nut. There's a through hole through it, and that bolt tightens down and pinches the cable so that it can't move. It's attached to the pulley. You can see here where the wire's all deformed. That's where it was previously positioned, and that's what seemed to give us the trouble. It was definitely reefed down on that connection, deforming the cable, which certainly isn't good either, so that'll probably be an issue over time, but for now I'm okay with it. So this brass looking piece with the through hole for the cable was an 8mm open-end wrench, and the top one is a 7mm wrench. So things have cooled down a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and get that air cleaner assembly put back on now so that we can button this up. Okay, so we've got this air box assembly like I was complaining about before. It was slightly dusty. I have no idea why. Hey, actually, sorry, I just thought about this. The spark plug, that's a bit strange because when we took this thing out first and we hadn't run it yet, the spark plug actually didn't look too bad. It was pretty clean. again, remember I pointed out that the exhaust side was really sooty, and I expected to see the same on the plug. So I'm wondering if during the process of trying to get this thing to start, somebody swapped in another plug. I'm obviously gonna have to verify this is the right plug. It seems to be handling it well. It should be a factory plug, but then again, I guess I don't know the history on it. So I'm gonna verify that. I'll report it back on the end of the video to see where it stands. But I thought that was a bit strange. So I would, like I said, I would have expected it to be really sooty. So the airbox is cleaned up. We can get this put back into place. Okay, so my cable's routed underneath here. My airbox is in the, go around to the carburetor first. And I can get these nuts back on. So I'm just gonna snug these right in through there. Start that by hand. And the short guy over here. All right, so let's tighten those up. That's nice and tight. That's nice and tight. Lose that extension. Tighten up the carb nuts. And then we have our breather hose. Needs to go back on this nipple. And it's got one of these relatively easy to use clamp. Damn it. A little too easy to use apparently. All right, so that's back on. And oh, my filter cover comes back on. What is your problem? This damn nipple is right in the way. And then that's my last 10mm bolt. And there we go. All right, so that is everything. And I'm just gonna double check now that I've got no problems with any hoses that are pinched. The fuel line's good, the breather line's good, and this electronics, this cable for whatever the hell that's going to is good, although that was pinched up there. So let's tuck that like that. All right, so there you have it. We are wrapped up with the Champion 2000 watt inverter generator. That was a no start, no run, and we were able to clean the carb out, get this thing going. Definitely by reading the spark plug, we were able to determine that it's able to accept the load and run relatively well with that major choke adjustment. So if you want to learn more about reading spark plugs, please look it up. It's kind of an old school thing. Guys like me grew up on carbs. It's not that difficult, but these days with fuel injection, it's not a very common thing. So, but on this type of stuff, it's a very handy thing to know. So look into it if you're interested. Otherwise, don't waste your time, I guess. So that's it. Thanks for joining us. I'm gonna finish up a maintenance on this thing, change the oil and stuff, and I think I'm gonna bring it back to the orphanage because it's been pretty clear to me over the course of this video that somebody wants me to do that. So that's what's gonna happen. So take care, see you next time.